Good morning, you are watching A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sanov and let's see the top stories. Giorgia Meloni and Donald Trump talked up chances of U.S. trade deal with Europe as the Italian Prime Minister visited Washington. High-level officials from the United States, Europe and Ukraine met, pushing for a collaborative approach for peace. Deputy Foreign Ministers of Azerbaijan, Georgia and Armenia hold first trilateral meeting in Tbilisi. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni met with President Donald Trump at the White House, where they discussed European Union tariffs, a key issue on the agenda. The two leaders, who share long-standing ties, aim to lay the groundwork for a potential trade deal with the EU. Our correspondent Rubio has more from Washington, D.C.
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is in the White House on Thursday to meet with longtime friend and ally President Trump. At the forefront of the agenda for their talks will be the potential for a trade deal between Washington and the European Union. Meloni is one of the few EU leaders with long-standing positive ties with Trump. In response to a question by the press on whether the European Union still views the United States as a reliable trading partner following President Trump's Liberation Day executive orders that issued wide-sweeping tariffs, Meloni responded, quote, "I'm here to work to make the West stronger. I believe in the West unity and that we have to talk and find a middle way to grow together." President Trump said that he believes that he could reach a deal with the European Union, but he cautioned it will have to be a fair deal.
We've had numerous talks, very at the highest level, frankly, with other countries. Yeah, we're doing very well, and we're moving along on trade very well. The United States was ripped off and taken advantage of by every country in the world, practically. I mean, I have to say practically, but just about everyone. That's not going to happen anymore, but we're going to make fair deals.
I'm sure we can make a deal, and I'm here to help on that. I cannot deal in the name of the European Union. My goal would be invite President Trump to pay an official visit to Italy and understand if there's a possibility when he comes to organize also such a meeting with Europe.
The two sides have a 90-day window to negotiate a settlement before tariffs rise steeply. Meloni is the first European leader to meet with President Trump at the White House since he announced those tariffs. President Trump also told reporters that he considers Meloni one of the real leaders of the world. Meloni's meeting with President Trump may offer the EU the deal that many on the continent are hoping for. EU countries are widely concerned of the economic impact that a 20% U.S. tariff could have, given the high volume of trade with the United States. The unique nature of Meloni's relationship with Trump offers Italy leverage in EU affairs as well. Meloni's close ties with the Trump administration is seen by many Italians as useful to hedge against the French-German axis that dominates EU affairs. Meloni's government has been calling on the EU to adopt a softer approach towards President Trump and his tariffs. At nearly 40 billion euro, Italy's trade surplus with the U.S. is the third largest among EU countries. I'm Ubi Shabander for A News, Washington, D.C.
U.S. President Donald Trump says China has reached out after the latest round of tariffs. While he stopped short of confirming direct talks with President Xi Jinping, Trump says communication is happening at high levels. Trump also says that a deal with Beijing is likely, but warned that if not, the United States will move forward on its own terms. He also announced a delay on the TikTok agreement, saying it will wait until trade issues are resolved. The U.S. currently has tariffs totaling 145% on Chinese goods.
I have a very good relationship with President Xi, and I think it's going to continue. And I would say they have reached out a number of times.
Xi or they?
Well, the same. I view it very similar. It would be top levels of China. And if you knew him, you would know that if they reached out, he knew exactly. He knew everything about it. He runs it very tight, very strong, very smart. And yeah, we're talking to China. Well, we have a deal for TikTok, but it'll be subject to China, so we'll just delay the deal till this thing works out one way or the other. And I think it's a good deal for China. The TikTok deal is very good. TikTok is good for China, and I think they'd like to see us do a deal, especially the deal that we have pretty much done with some of the best companies in the world.
Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet in Phnom Penh on Thursday on the final leg of his Southeast Asian tour. Cambodia's government says the two countries have signed and exchanged 37 documents during Xi's visit. They cover areas such as investment, trade and finance. Beijing has already invested billions of dollars in Cambodia's infrastructure, including roads and airports, and is the country's largest creditor. Xi's visit follows stops in Vietnam and Malaysia and comes in the wake of U.S. tariffs that have impacted the region. The price of everyday essentials like Nike's, Levi's jeans and Gap t-shirts could soon spike in the United States as fresh tariffs threaten the Asian factories at the heart of the global clothing supply chain. A wave of new trade measures is already disrupting key manufacturing hubs like China, Vietnam and Indonesia.
The American consumer may soon feel the pinch as new tariffs reshape global trade dynamics. In 2024, China, Vietnam, and Indonesia accounted for 95% of all Nike footwear production, a staggering concentration now under threat. The U.S. has already slapped significant tariffs on Chinese goods, while Vietnam and Indonesia face 10% tariffs that could rise by July unless new trade deals are reached. Vietnam is particularly in the spotlight, suspected of being an indirect entry point for Chinese goods, either through rerouted shipments or by incorporating Chinese components into exports. This has placed Vietnam and companies dependent on its supply chains, like Gap, in a precarious position. Gap shares have dropped 14% since President Trump's tariff announcement on April 2nd. Nike has seen a 14.7% decline, and Levi's stock is down 10.6%. But the impact doesn't end with fashion. Technology companies are also deeply connected with Chinese manufacturing. Nearly 90% of gaming consoles sold in the US, from Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, are assembled in China. Apple continues to outsource most of its assembly operations there. NVIDIA, a leader in AI and graphics technology, relies on Chinese components and contracts Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company to produce its chips. Meanwhile, American agriculture is bracing for another hit. During the first U.S.-China trade war from 2018 to 2019, U.S. farmers lost billions in revenue. Now, history may repeat itself. Analysts warn that about 15% of U.S. farm exports went to China in 2024, with the soybean industry especially vulnerable as China remains its largest buyer. As tensions rise and stock prices tumble, the economic impact of these tariffs is set to ripple across multiple sectors, from the clothes we wear to the tech we use and the food we grow.
As trade tensions escalate between the United States and China, Beijing is leveraging a powerful economic weapon beyond tariffs. Its near monopoly on rare earth minerals. These critical resources are essential to United States military hardware and high-tech industries. And China's grip on their global supply could threaten Washington's reindustrialization goals.
While tariffs remain a prominent tool in the ongoing US-China trade war, China is now flexing its control over global supply chains in a way that could have far-reaching consequences. Beijing controls nearly 70% of rare earth mineral extraction and an overwhelming 90% of processing worldwide, giving it significant leverage over industries critical to US national security. In contrast, although the US is the world's second largest producer of rare earths and has the 7th largest reserves, it remains highly dependent on Chinese imports. Recognizing this vulnerability, the Trump administration notably excluded critical minerals from its reciprocal global tariffs, signaling their irreplaceable role in US supply chains. These rare earth elements feed directly into American defense and technology industries. Dysprosium, for instance, is essential to the electric motors that power the advanced F-35 fighter jets. It's also used in electric vehicles, drones, robotics, and touch screens. Yttrium, another restricted element, is vital for jet engines, high-frequency radar, and precision laser systems. Beijing recently imposed restrictions on 7 rare earths, directly challenging the US's access to these inputs. This strategic maneuver allows China to dominate upstream supply chains, even as the US attempts to block China from accessing downstream technologies such as advanced semiconductors. In short, while Washington seeks to isolate China from next-gen chip production, Beijing is reminding the world it controls the materials needed to build them in the first place. By tightening its grip on rare earth supplies, China isn't just responding to tariffs, it's asserting its dominance over the infrastructure of global innovation. For the US, this highlights a deeper vulnerability in its push for reindustrialization and military modernization.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused China of supplying weapons and gunpowder to Russia, his first direct claim of Chinese military support in the war. Speaking at a press conference in Kiev, Zelensky said intelligence also suggests China is producing weapons on Russian territory. Moscow and Beijing haven't yet commented on these accusations. However, China has previously denied any involvement in the war. The allegation threatens to further strain relations between Kiev and Beijing, as China continues to present itself as neutral despite strong economic ties with Moscow.
I think it's important information. It's not very pleasant. We finally received information that China is supplying weapons to the Russian Federation, and we are ready to talk about it in detail. Today, we have general information from the security service, from reconnaissance, and I think we will be able to talk about it in great detail next week, especially about the data that we believe that Chinese representatives are engaged in the production of some weapons on the territory of Russia.
United States hails diplomatic talks in Paris on Thursday, an encouraging reception. The discussions to end the war in Ukraine focused on key proposal for a multinational force of up to 30 countries to oversee any future agreement. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's office called the talks constructive and positive, and President Donald Trump says Kiev and Washington could sign a minerals and economic cooperation deal as soon as next week.
European powers say they're keen to ensure their role in shaping the future of Ukraine. High-level officials from the US, Europe and Ukraine met in Paris on Thursday, pushing for a collaborative approach for peace. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff with senior officials from France, Britain and Germany. The so-called E3 were at the Élysée Palace. A key proposal was the creation of a multinational peacekeeping force, potentially involving up to 30 countries. However, its deployment depends on US military support, which has not yet been confirmed. A senior advisor to French President Emmanuel Macron called the talks honest and open. The talks will continue next week.
The Europeans, the Ukrainians and the Americans who have agreed to meet next week in London to continue discussions on this basis so that we can hope in the very near future to achieve a full and complete unconditional ceasefire, to which the Ukrainians have already agreed and to which we hope Russia will agree in turn.
While the discussions in Paris were viewed as progress, it remains unclear whether all parties will agree to the proposed terms. French President Emmanuel Macron says it's important for European and Ukrainian unity.
And I think this is a very important occasion to have convergence with our Ukrainian friends and amongst the Europeans alongside with you, because I think everybody wants to get peace, for sure, and a robust and sustainable peace. And this is a we clearly will pursue. And now the question is about the phasing, the way to approach this resource, which is the one we do wish.
Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told Rubio that Moscow was ready to continue joint work with Washington to eliminate the long-standing causes of the Ukraine conflict. The upcoming meeting in London is seen as an important step in ensuring the peace talks remain fair and balanced as both sides navigate the complexities of the conflict.
Thank you very much.
As the war in Ukraine rages on, EU member states and the bloc as a whole are ramping up defense spending, trying to find ways to strengthen and train their militaries and prepare for any future security threat. However, some face problems with recruitment and outdated technology.
Finland isn't prepared to defend itself from Russia. That's the warning coming from Finnish fighters on the front lines in Ukraine. Many of them completed their military service in the Finnish Defence Forces, often training in the Pori Brigade, a unit known for preparing soldiers for international missions. But on the modern battlefield, they say that training is no longer sufficient to protect either Finland or Ukraine, as it feels outdated. They've seen real combat, and according to them, what they learned back home doesn't match what war looks like today. The Russia-Ukraine war has intensified the need for stronger defence in Europe. European countries are confronting significant challenges in modernizing their defense capabilities, particularly in the absence of robust US support. Despite increased defense spending, many European militaries remain reliant on outdated equipment and fragmented systems, hindering their ability to respond effectively to contemporary threats. The decline in military readiness is also evident in the reduced number of active personnel and equipment. Since the end of the Cold War, European armies have seen significant reductions in manpower and hardware, leading to diminished operational capabilities. For instance, the combined number of main battle tanks among major European powers has decreased substantially, impacting their ability to conduct sustained ground operations. In response to these challenges, initiatives like the European Commission's Readiness 2030 aim to bolster defense capabilities through increased investment and collaboration. However, without addressing the underlying issues of fragmentation and outdated systems, Europe's ability to defend itself independently remains uncertain.
The Readiness 2030 plan is crucial. It provides up to 800 billion euros of defense investment possibilities for the member states. And this means, for example, joint procurement with Ukraine in the European Union, but also in the Ukrainian defense industry. It's strengthening the defense industrial base of Ukraine. And of course, we need also a credible deterrence and defense posture in the European Union. And thus we have to develop our own defense industrial base too.
A critical issue is the lack of interoperability among European forces. Unlike the United States, which utilizes a streamlined array of military platforms, European nations operate a diverse and often incompatible set of equipment. This diversity complicates joint operations and logistics, making coordinated defense efforts more challenging even as the threat grows. Although countries like France, Germany, and the UK possess formidable military forces, a lack of coordination and integration between European nations has led to fragmented defense capabilities, ultimately diminishing their collective strength in the face of growing global threats.
We have to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And so, my wish is for the Americans to be engaged by our side. And my wish is for the Americans to provide support or even active participation in all of this. Because it is good for their European allies, it is good for NATO, it is good for all of us. But we have to prepare for a situation in which they will not be with us. We have to prepare for both cases.
Germany has set ambitious goals to increase its defense capabilities, but the Bundeswehr saw its personnel numbers drop by 1,500 in 2023. Although Germany plans to expand its military by 2031, recruiting soldiers remains a significant challenge.
We have seen how the negotiations have gone so far, and that Russia has always added something afterwards. This shows very clearly that Russia is currently not interested in real peace. That makes it all the more important that we insist on a ceasefire, that it is possible, and that it is linked to the immediate cessation of attacks on infrastructure, for example, and that more opportunities for a good future for Ukraine can arise from it, especially for a fair and reasonable peace.
In the UK, recruitment is also struggling. In 2023, the British Army failed to meet its recruitment goals, with a deficit of nearly 6,000 troops. The UK Ministry of Defence has been actively trying to improve recruitment, but the number of people joining the army continues to fall short of what is needed. Many European armies are also grappling with more practical challenges, such as unappealing pay and poor living conditions for recruits. As a result, EU countries are facing significant challenges in maintaining a robust military force. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen recently addressed this shift in approach. The future of Europe's defense capabilities will depend on how effectively nations adapt to evolving challenges and shifting priorities.
5 NATO allies, the Baltic states, Poland and Finland, are withdrawing from the landmine ban treaty known as the Ottawa Convention. They are ditching the ban on anti-personnel mines, citing threats from Russia.
The decision by 5 NATO member states to begin withdrawing from a landmark treaty banning anti-personnel landmines has raised concerns among humanitarian and disarmament organizations. The move came ahead of a key United Nations meeting in Geneva aimed at bolstering global efforts to eliminate the use of explosive ordnance. Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia issued a joint statement in March, indicating plans to exit the 1997 Ottawa Treaty, citing regional security concerns. Finland followed with a similar announcement shortly thereafter. All 5 countries pointed to shifting security dynamics in Europe as a contributing factor. The Ottawa Treaty, signed by over 160 countries, prohibits the use, stockpiling, production, and transfer of anti-personnel mines. Finland had been a party to the agreement since 2012. Ahead of the Geneva meeting hosted by the UN Mine Action Service and the Geneva International Center for Humanitarian Demining, officials warned of a potentially significant setback in the decades-long global campaign to reduce landmine use. Tobias Privatelli, director of GICHD, acknowledged the challenges, stating that hard-won progress is at risk. UNMAS Policy Chief James Staples noted that over 60 countries and territories, including Ukraine, Sudan, Myanmar, and Syria, remain affected by explosive remnants of war. Amnesty International Finland voiced concern over Finland's decision, warning it could damage the country's international standing and weaken multilateral legal norms. The international campaign to ban landmines, recipient of the 1997 Nobel Peace Prize, also urged Helsinki to reconsider. In a related development, Finnish defense firm Insta expressed tentative interest in exploring landmine production should national policy be amended. The company's CEO said a final decision had not yet been made, but confirmed that a remotely detonated mine is currently under development. While the United States is not a signatory to the Ottawa Treaty, it has historically played a significant role in funding mine action programs globally. Recent reductions in American foreign aid have prompted additional concerns from humanitarian actors. The 3-day Geneva conference gathered international stakeholders to assess the future of landmine policy and address the humanitarian impact of explosive remnants of war.
A deadly shooting has rocked Florida State University Thursday afternoon after a 20-year-old who is the son of a Leon County deputy opened fire near the campus student union. 2 people were killed and at least 6 others were injured. The alleged shooter was shot by police and taken into custody. The suspect reportedly used his mother's former service weapon and had a shotgun at the scene. He remains hospitalized, and police haven't yet identified a motive. The 2 people killed were not students, and their names haven't been released. This is the second shooting at FSU in more than a decade.
The alleged shooter was also a long-standing member of the Leon County Sheriff's Office Citizen Advisory or Youth Advisory Council. So he has been steeped in the Leon County Sheriff's Office family, engaged in a number of training programs that we have. So it's not a surprise to us that he had access to weapons. This event is tragic in more ways than you people in the audience could ever fathom from a law enforcement perspective. But I will tell you this, we will make sure that we do everything we can to prosecute.
Severe rainfall has hit Italy's Piedmont region on Thursday. The extreme bad weather has triggered landslides and flooding across several provinces in northwest Italy, putting it on red alert. Strong winds and torrential rain has disrupted transport and prompting authorities to restrict access to high-risk areas. More than 400 firefighters were deployed, with more than 300 emergency interventions reported, especially in Turin and Biella, where the Elbe River overflowed. Scientists believe they have detected the strongest possible signs of life on a distant planet outside the solar system. Chemical fingerprints of gases normally found on Earth have been found on the exoplanet named K2-18b. It could predict microbial activity and potentially be a landmark discovery.
Are we the only living beings in the universe? That's the question so many people have been wondering about for centuries. Well, now, scientists believe they've discovered the first potential chemical signatures in gases that could suggest there might be life elsewhere in the solar system. Researchers used the James Webb Space Telescope and found that the exoplanet named K2-18b has an atmosphere that possibly contains dimethyl sulfide and dimethyl disulfide, which are produced exclusively by living organisms, primarily marine microbes on Earth. Lead researcher Professor Nico Madhusudan from the University of Cambridge says that while this is not a confirmation of life, it could be a strong candidate for a biosignature.
We have found signs of biosignature molecules, either DMS or DMDS or both of which are produced uniquely by life here on Earth and have been predicted to be biosignatures on planets around other stars as well. And we found the strongest evidence to date on a biosignature molecule, in this case a combination, potentially around another star outside the solar system. And that is a major breakthrough in our search for life beyond the solar system. Not only that there is a chance that the planet can actually be habitable, but what we are finding is that we are demonstrating that it is possible to detect biosignatures around in atmospheres of such planets around nearby stars with existing facilities, and that's a big breakthrough.
The planet is 124 light years away in the Leo constellation and orbits within the habitable zone of a red dwarf star. But scientists say more research needs to be done.
So we want to observe more to get it to a 5 sigma level, less than a chance in a million, a part in a million of a fluke. But we also want to do more theoretical and observational studies to make sure that there is absolutely no other way we can make this molecule without life. I think it is our responsibility as scientists and as part of a society that we want to answer this very deep question in a very careful and robust manner. But the excitement is still there, nevertheless, that we've got the capability to do it now.
While the professor adds that this is a monumental and important discovery, he adds that they also have to be extremely cautious.
A trilateral meeting between the deputy foreign ministers of Georgia, Azerbaijan and Armenia took place in Tbilisi. Azerbaijan was represented by Deputy Foreign Minister Elnur Mammadov. According to officials, the discussions were focused on prospects for regional cooperation. The deputy foreign ministers of the three countries exchanged views on advancing collaborative efforts in the South Caucasus region. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has officially declared his government's intention to remove references to territorial claims on Karabakh from the country's constitution, a long-standing demand from Azerbaijan in the ongoing peace process.
Prime Minister of Armenia Nikol Pashinyan stated that Armenia's new constitution should exclude references to the 1990 Declaration of Independence, which has been seen as the legal and ideological basis for claims over Azerbaijani territories. Although the current constitution does not explicitly mention the annexation of Karabakh, it references the declaration which cites the 1991 decision by separatist forces to join Armenia. Azerbaijan has consistently insisted that the removal of such references is a prerequisite for signing a final peace agreement. Despite a general consensus on the treaty's content, Baku maintains that it will not sign the deal until the Armenian constitution no longer implies territorial claims. Azerbaijan also continues to demand a joint statement declaring the dissolution of the OC Minsk Group's mandate. Pashinyan has now instructed officials to begin drafting a new constitution to be put to a national referendum, tentatively scheduled for May 2026 to coincide with parliamentary elections. The Prime Minister justified the decision on internal political and legal grounds rather than external pressure, suggesting the declaration's principles contradict Armenia's current statehood. Nevertheless, domestic challenges persist. Opposition forces in Armenia, some of which continue to leverage the Karabakh issue, are seeking to undermine the government's legitimacy ahead of the vote. Forecasts suggest that the Pashinyan's party may struggle to retain a parliamentary majority, placing the referendum's outcome in doubt. Meanwhile, Armenia has linked the dissolution of the OC Minsk Group to the peace treaty's finalization, a stance Baku opposes. Azerbaijani officials argued that all conflict resolution mechanisms must be dismantled if the conflict is officially declared over. Pashinyan's recent remarks reflect a shift in political tone, yet experts note that real progress hinges on two developments: formal approval of the new constitution and the removal of all remaining structures tied to the conflict, including the Minsk Group. Without these, a lasting peace agreement remains elusive.
Turkey has pledged major support to Syria's rebuilding efforts following the end of a 13-year civil war and the fall of the Assad regime. On an official visit to Damascus, Turkey's Trade Minister Ömer Bolat laid out plans for wide-ranging cooperation in trade, infrastructure, and institutional development. Turkey says it will help Syria develop institutional capacity and address infrastructure deficiencies. The announcement was made by Trade Minister Ömer Bolat on Thursday during an official visit to Damascus. He spent 2 days in the Syrian capital meeting with top government officials and business leaders. The trip focused on reviving cooperation in trade, customs, transportation, investment, finance, banking, contracting, and energy partnerships. Bolat held talks with the country's economy and industry minister Nidal Al-Shar, Finance Minister Mohammed Yasser Barnia, Transportation Minister Yarub Suleiman Badr, and the head of the land and sea ports Qutayba Ahmad Badawi. During the meetings, Bolat congratulated Syrian officials on what he described the country's December the 8th revolution, which marked the end of a devastating civil war that had ripple effects across the region, including in Turkey. Speaking to members of the Damascus Chamber of Commerce, Bolat pledged Turkey's full support for Syria's reconstruction efforts.
Infrastructure, economic legislation, and institutional capacity are now being re-established in Syria, and the government of Turkey will support the development of institutional capacity and infrastructure deficiencies to the extent requested by the Syrian government. Like all ministries in Turkey, we have been instructed by our president to support Syria. The establishment of a new free Syria here will be your work, and we, as your Muslim brothers and neighbors, have the duty to support you.
Bulletin says that Turkey stands ready to share its experience and technological capabilities with the Syrian people. This visit signals a major step forward in regional cooperation and Turkey's readiness to support the country's path to recovery. Earlier, I spoke with our correspondent Adnan Nasser in Beirut about the interaction between Israel and Turkey in Syria and what it means for the region's dynamics. Adnan, how would you characterize the current state of Israeli-Turkish interaction in Syria? Is it one of rivalry, coexistence, or something else?
Well, certainly it's not coexistence. We're seeing a division of spheres of influence. The Israelis are looking to expand their military parameters within the southern region of Syria. They've even threatened at times to hit Damascus neighborhoods under the pretext of protecting minorities in Damascus. And then you see now the new leadership in Syria both condemning the attacks of Israel, but also making it very clear it does not want to engage in hostilities with the Israelis. We're seeing even growing indications of a desire on the part of Damascus to normalize with Israel. It just seems at this point that the Israelis are not trusting the government in Damascus. And part of that is also the closeness of the government in Damascus with Turkey. They see the Turkish government as a rival. They see the Turkish government as the replacement of the Iranian influence that was once previously existing in Syria under the Assad regime. And the Israelis are making it very clear they're not going to exchange Iranian influence and threats with the Turkish one.
Afghanistan is witnessing a significant increase in the number of refugees returning from Pakistan. The International Organization for Migration has described the situation as reaching a critical point and called for urgent international attention. Meanwhile, the Norwegian Chargé d'Affaires to Afghanistan has criticized the forced deportation of Afghans and reaffirmed Norway's continued support. Trumpm Bahis reports from Kabul.
The International Organization for Migration has reported a significant spike in the number of Afghans forcibly deported from Pakistan, with nearly 60,000 individuals crossing back into Afghanistan within a 2-week period. According to IOM, every day thousands of families are arriving at the Trumpm border, many with only a few belongings and no clear plan for what comes next. The majority of returnees are women and children, and many are arriving in extremely vulnerable conditions. Since April 4, IOM has observed a sharp rise in the number of returnees. Afghanistan's capacity to absorb this many returnees in such a short time is severely limited. IOM has called on international community to respond swiftly, stressing that the situation is reaching a critical point and requires immediate attention. Meanwhile, the acting Minister of Refugees and Repatriation Affairs, Mauli Abdul Kabir, met with Per Albert Alsos, the Norwegian Chargé d'Affaires to Afghanistan. In the meeting, Mr. Alsos criticized the forced deportation of Afghan refugees from Pakistan and assured continued support for the returnees. This is Trumpm Bahis in Kabul for A News.
Well, that's all we have for now. Stay tuned for more updates and have a wonderful morning.